After leaving Gaza on the Mediterranean coast, the Egyptian army took a caravan route that led inland to the foot of Carmel Ridge. There, Tutmosis ascertained through spies that the enemy had taken a defensive position in the neighborhood of Megiddo, a fortified town that lay beyond the ridge of the plain of Esdraelon. Of the three routes the Egyptians might take to attack their assembled foes, the shortest and most direct was through the mountain defile of Aruna. But, as the army's cautious commanders pointed out at a war council, it was by far the most dangerous. The pass was so narrow that the army would have to march horse after horse and man after man, thereby offering the enemy superb opportunity for ambush. Alternatively, the Canaanites could choose to wait until the Egyptian divisions began to emerge from the pass, then attack and defeat them piecemeal. Tutmosis himself made the decision. "I will march on this road to Aruna," he declared. As related by Egyptian chronicles, the choice was based mostly on considerations of prestige. "They will say, 'These enemies whom Re abominates, has His Majesty set out on another road because he has become afraid of us?' So they will speak." Yet, given the military acuity Tutmosis III would demonstrate throughout his career, it seems likely that the pharaoh also calculated that the perilous Aruna Pass would be the last route the Canaanites would expect him to take. Whatever motivated the pharaoh's decision, it proved a good one in the end. The Canaanites failed to seize advantage, and the Egyptians made their way through the pass without incident, camping on the edge of the plain of Esdraelon. On the eve of the battle, the proclamation sounded in the Egyptian camp. "Prepare ye, make your weapons ready, since the Pharaoh will engage in combat with that wretched enemy in the morning." At dawn, the Egyptians debouched the plain, led by Tutmosis III. The Pharaoh subsequently related that he rode in a golden chariot, arrayed in his panoply of war, like Horus, mighty of arm. As one Egyptian told it, the Canaanites were waiting to meet them. Millions of men and hundreds of thousands, the chiefest of all lands, standing in their chariots. This was an exaggeration. The enemy army, which barred the direct approach to Megiddo, probably was relatively weak, and larger forces guarded routes to the north and south, just as Tutmosis may have foreseen. At any rate, the famed Battle of Megiddo was in fact a rout. Only 83 Canaanites were killed, 340 taken prisoner. The rest fled to the fortifications of Megiddo to find the gates already shut against the Egyptians. Many Canaanite warriors, including the king of Kadesh, were forced to knot their own clothing into ropes and haul themselves over the town walls. Still, the Egyptian troops failed to press their assault, and as a result, Tutmosis was required to undertake a siege. 7 months passed before the Canaanite leaders, starved at last to submission, emerged from the town and fell at the pharaoh's feet, as Tutmosis himself put it, to beg breath for their nostrils. Tutmosis showed mercy in that instance. He reported that he allowed his enemies to leave, "And they went, all of them, on donkeys," the king said, "for I'd taken their horses, and I carried off all of their citizens to Egypt, and their property likewise." The Egyptian booty included 924 chariots, 2,232 horses, 3,929 cattle, 20,500 other animals, along with 87 children of the Canaanite rulers, and 1,796 persons of lesser rank. Far more important, the fall of Megiddo was to Tutmosis as significant as the capture of 1,000 cities. It brought nearly all of northern Palestine and southern Syria under Egyptian control. The pharaoh's martial ambitions were by no means satisfied, however. He envisioned the Egyptian empire that would extend throughout Syria to the banks of the Middle Euphrates and the ranges of the Taurus Mountains. To achieve that aim, Tutmosis III was constantly on the march. Spring after spring, in the course of at least 14 campaigns, he led his legions into battle. Capturing the ports of Phoenicia, he thereby transported his troops by water and used the newly won cities as bases of supply and communication for his inland excursions. Finally, making his major move against the Mitanni, he constructed a fleet of boats from the cedars of the Lebanese mountains near Byblos and carted the vessels on ox-drawn wagons across bleak and hostile terrain. Arriving at the Euphrates, the army was ferried across the great stream and fell upon the Mitannian homeland. As Thutmose wrote, "My majesty devastated it, and it was turned to red dust on which no foliage will ever grow again." Having made his point, Thutmose withdrew, recrossing the river and erecting a monument to himself beside the one commemorating the brief incursion of his grandfather, Thutmose I. This time, however, the Egyptians were here to stay, and even the expansion-minded Mitanni came to recognize the Euphrates as the boundary beyond which they dared not pass. Indeed, so willing were the old enemies to accept the status quo that they eventually entered into a treaty of alliance, and, to cement the relationship later, an Egyptian pharaoh took a pair of Mitanni princesses as brides. In their administration of Syrian and Palestinian territories, Thutmose III and most of his successors showed a lenient touch that they failed to display elsewhere. In Nubia, for example, where Egyptian holdings by now extended as far as the Nile's fourth cataract, the Egyptian overlords forbade local chiefs to exercise power, but the petty rulers of Palestine and Syria were generally permitted to keep their seats and enjoy a certain independence, as long as they behaved themselves as good vassals and kept paying tribute into Egyptian coffers. Above all, they had to guarantee to the Egyptians unimpeded use of the historic trade routes that opened the way north to Asia Minor, east to Babylon and Assyria, west to Crete, Cyprus, and the islands of the Aegean, and even to the Greek mainland. In a sort of insurance policy against revolt, the sons of the vassaled monarchs were often taken as hostages to Egypt, where they were treated royally, housed in splendid palace, and schooled as Egyptians. That practice also paid long-term premium. On the death of their fathers, the thoroughly Egyptianized princes were often installed upon their native thrones, where they ruled in fond and faithful recollection of the time when they had been taken to Egypt as children to serve the king as their lord and to stand at the door of the king.
Thank you.